it's Jessi. I'm recording these in a row, so I'm still drinking Tung Ting Fireside Oolong from Keys to Teas, like I was in my stats video. And it is still horribly oversteeped, and I am suffering. This is my favorites video. I struggled this year. Last year when I did my favorites, there were just books I immediately thought of that, like, I love that book in this genre. I sorted my list by genres and immediately was like, yes, this one, this one. This year was a little bit tougher, so I actually sorted it by genre and then sorted within the genre by rating in an attempt to get a little closer to what my favorites would be. And we'll talk about that in just a second. But first, First, let me start with the 8 books that I read that got 5 stars for me on Storygraph, like rounded up to 5 stars. I'll pull them up if I own them. So first, To Be Taught a Fortunate by Becky Chambers. In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. The Lost Daughter Collected by Lindsay Drager, which I do own now because my mother-in-law got it for me for Christmas, but it's not here yet. Ring Shout by P. Djeli Clark. Black Sun by Rebecca Rowanhorse. Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria by Dr. Beverly Daniel Tatum. Harrow the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. And Alatsway by Darcy Little Badger. Those are the books that I read that got 5 stars. They might show up later in this video as favorites, maybe. So I'm gonna save what my top 3 were for now. I'll show that as I go through each genre. But we're gonna start with things that aren't really genres. They're more about books as they are presented to you. But 3 rules. 1, I'm not including any rereads in this. It just doesn't seem fair. If I'm rereading something, chances are I love it, so there's that. I'm only including 1 per author. Just that way it can be spread out, the love can be spread out. This only really came up like 1 or 2 times, so it doesn't really matter. I think that's it. And like I mentioned before, just because it's my favorite doesn't mean it's the most highly rated book in that genre. Also, as I'll talk about when I get to them, some of the genres here I'm defining a little loosely, and I'll explain that for the ones that it's relevant for. All right, as I go through these, I'm gonna give no more than a 60-second review for any of these. I have my phone up. I'm gonna cut myself off at 60 seconds. That way this video does not end up like an hour long. All right, first, for my 2021 releases, my favorite book that I read was Starland by River Solomon. This is a story about a young woman escaping a cult after she is become pregnant, and she raises her children outside of this cult, and she's learning about the world and learning about herself, and it starts not normal, but like as a fairly simple-ish escape a cult story, and then it becomes more and more strange and horror and speculative as it goes, and I loved it. It was really just an interesting exploration of things, and I loved how casually things like gender were explored and kind of almost cast off. And it was just so good to see the protagonist growing throughout the experience. All right, next up, YA or middle grade. I don't read a lot of middle grade, so I just kind of lumped it in here. But my favorite YA that I read this year was Alatsway by Darcy Little Badger. This is a novel. It's a urban fantasy. It takes place in our world where paranormal things just exist. They're just part of the world and kind of taken for granted. They're just normal. And Ellie can bring ghosts back to life, including her lovely little dog. And then her cousin dies, and suddenly her cousin is haunting her dreams, and she's kind of investigating what actually happened to her cousin. This had wonderful themes about like what it means to own a land and who really owns it, which I really, really enjoyed. There was also the protagonist. Ellie is just so fantastic. Like, I love her and would do anything for her. She is sweet and totally great. There was a very optimistic tone to this that was really refreshing, especially to read in 2021. So I really loved this book. Next, for novellas. Now, I read a lot of novellas, so there was a lot to choose from here, but my favorite novella was Ring Shout by P. Djeli Clark. This is a story, a kind of historical fiction novella in which the KKK are actual real life monsters, not just like metaphorical human monsters. And there's a group of young women who are working to take down the KKK. Honestly, I read this one pretty early in the year and I'm fuzzy in my memories of it, but I remember really enjoying it, and I probably will reread it this year to kind of refresh my memory on that because I loved it and I just can't explain why because I don't really remember why. I just spilled tea all over my floor. Next up, for graphic novels. I did not read as many graphic novels this year as I did last year, but my favorite one would be The Daughters of Ys by M.T. Anderson and Joe Rio. First off, it's gorgeous. This is about two young girls who are the daughters of a king and a magical woman, and the king has kind of been wasting away since their mother died, and they take over the kingdom, and they both have two very different ideas of how to rule this kingdom, and they clash over that. Largely, this is a gorgeous, beautiful book to read. I don't want to open the pages, I don't want to spoil anything, but it's just beautiful to look at. And I also just felt myself really immersed in the story as I read, which made me really, really enjoy the experience. For my favorite anthology or short story collection, I say would be Love After the End by Joshua Whitehead. This is a collection of First Peoples, Indigenous peoples, Native American tales that kind of, the theme here is that after you've already gone through one apocalypse, aka the entire genocide of indigenous peoples in the Americas, it can't really get much worse than that. So it's this idea of like surviving future genocides or future apocalypses when the world ends again and it doesn't really matter because it's already ended. And there's a level of sadness in there, but also a lot of hope for the future, and resilience would be the one word if I had to sum it up. This collection is all about resilience. Obviously, like any collection, some of them I loved, some of them I didn't like quite so much, and there's my timer, so I'm gonna stop. All right, for nonfiction, this was a tough one, but I picked for my favorite nonfiction In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. I could have very easily gone with Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together, but this one, In the Dream House, just had an emotional hit to me that I don't think can be surpassed. It's about Carmen Maria Machado. She explores her own abusive relationship and uses that as a lens through which to explore the history of abuse among the queer community, specifically in sapphic relationships that's kind of largely ignored and shoved under the rug. And she really spends a lot of time exploring that, and she does it in such a beautiful way that, like, at times it feels almost like you're just listening to a story, and that story is very heartbreaking and hard to listen to and resonated with me a lot. And so it's gorgeous, and I think every young queer woman should read this, and I think just about everybody should read it, but especially I think for queer women. All right, next up for contemporary, I'm gonna go with The Wicker King by Kay Ingram. I read this also kind of close to the beginning of the year and middle of the year, I don't know, time is an illusion, for Queer Blackathon, and it was super interesting. This is about two young boys. I do not remember their names. Jack sounds like one of their names. Anyway, and one of them sees things, and the other one kind of feeds into those delusions a lot and doesn't really, he wants to help his friend, but doesn't really know how to, and kind of ends up feeding the delusions. And it's all about these two boys and their unhealthy, what's the word? Attachment to one another thing. Anyway, I can't think of the word. And I thought it was really interesting to read, and it really captured my fascination as I read. Next up for a classic, I'm gonna go with Dracula by Bram Stoker. I think I said Frankenstein last year, so I feel like classic horror just might be a thing for me. Turn of the Screw didn't do so well, but Dracula, if you don't know, is about actually you might not know the story of Dracula as well as you think you do. but is about a young Englishman who goes to Transylvania to sell a house to Count Dracula. And then when he comes back, things just kind of start going to heck. And it's really interesting. And there's definitely an exploration here of xenophobia that I wish I could have analyzed more. And I definitely want to get a physical copy of this, maybe one of those like easy reader ones where it's like, ooh, look at this theme that's being explored, because I do want to explore this in a more academic way, because I thought it was brilliant. And I just think I kind of didn't get to see the point because I was so absorbed by the story as a story. For literary fiction, I'm going with The Lost Daughter Collective by Lindsay Drager. I am going to avoid talking about this one as much as I can. I only have a minute. This is probably my favorite book of the year. It made me bawl like a baby, like cry my eyes out. And it's all about the relationship between fathers and daughters. What does it mean to be a daughter? What does it mean to be the father of a daughter? What causes a father to lose his daughter, and what does that father become when his daughter is lost? And it's it just hit. And I don't think this book is necessarily for everyone. I don't think everybody is going to get out of it what I got out of it. But I fundamentally believe there are some books that are just for the right person at the right time, and this year that was me. And I'm already kind of choking up, so we're gonna move on from that one. Next was historical fiction. For historical fiction, my favorite this year was Kindred by Octavia Butler. This might be stretching the historical fiction line a little bit because half of this takes place in the modern day, and the only reason you get that well, not our modern day, but the modern when it was written. And the only reason you get that historical perspective is because she travels back in time, but I'm gonna count it because otherwise I would have had to rearrange everything. This is about a young black woman in the late 70s, early 80s, who magically gets transported back in time, and every time she is confronted by the same white family. And I'm gonna leave it there. I feel like the premise, it gets revealed pretty quickly, but I don't want to give that away if you already know, because I know I spent the first like 20 pages of this being like, okay, but when did she find that out? So I don't want to give that one away, but it's hard to read, like really hard to read, but it's also really good and I really recommend it. And if you can get an edition that's not quite as ugly as this one, I would also recommend that. My favorite romance this year was The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, I don't know how to say it with the actual French accent, by V.E. Schwab. I want to make 2022 my year of romance because I really think I could like romance if I spent some more time reading it, because even though that's one of my larger genres, most of the romance I read is like actually just romance that happens to be in other books. Anyway, Addie LaRue is about a young woman, French woman in the 17th, 18th century, who makes a deal with the devil. And in exchange for what she gets from him, she is completely forgettable. Nobody remembers her once they close the door between them. And she's kind of getting a little worn down by this. And then she meets somebody that remembers her. And that's all I'll say about it. I think that even that might be too much. And it's been so long talking about romance books that was my time. All right, here's where I start really stretching things. For my favorite mystery thriller, I'm going with Ninth House, Locked Tomb, Gideon and Harrow the Ninth by Tam Samir. This might be a bit of a stretch. Technically, Harrow the Ninth is the one I rated higher and one I like more, but they go together. But they are mysteries. Like, there's a mystery in both of these books, so I'm going with it because the mysteries and thrillers I read this year weren't good. So, these are about Gideon and Harrow. They're so hot. Gideon and Harrow, who in Gideon the Ninth get invited to compete in a contest to become a lictor, which is like the right hand to God. So Harrow is a necromancer and Gideon is her guardian cavalier. And the two of them end up in this creepy house together where they have to figure out what's going on. hence the mystery. Harrow also has kind of a murder mystery vibe to it, so mysteries, and I love them both. Next, for horror, my favorite horror of the year, House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski. This is weird. It is about, it's a book within a book about a movie. Basically, this documentary comes out about this house that is bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. And this kid, after this old man then writes a manuscript about that, and then this kid finds it after the old man dies. This kid finds it and starts transcribing it and also adding his own notes, except the documentary never existed. And this is like this kid's notes. Now, this is not the easiest thing to read. It starts out relatively easy. It's just got like footnotes and it's not too bad, but then by the end you're getting pages that look like this or like this, and it gets progressively, let me see if I can find one of the harder ones, harder and weirder to read, and it's just fun, difficult, creepy, loved it. All right, for my favorite science fiction of the year, I'm going with To Be Taught If Fortunate by Becky Chambers. Honestly, I could just say Becky Chambers for my favorite sci-fi. I had a lot of trouble, technically this one's higher rated, but I had a lot of trouble because as much as I love To Be Taught If Fortunate, and it's fantastic, I don't think it had quite as much impact on me as, oh my god, what is the name? The one book in the Wayfarers series. I'm wasting my time. I can't remember the name of it. I think that one had a little more impact, especially in 2021, because it's about people being trapped together. But To Be Taught If Fortunate is about scientists on a spaceship exploring planets to try to find out about the life that lives there under different conditions, but then their contact with Earth starts slowly fading, and they kind of have to decide what to do, whether they should turn back and go home or whether they should keep going. And it has a lot of themes about scientific exploration and research ethics, and that's just really my jam. So I loved this book. I will be rereading it probably in 2022. All right, and the last of our genres. I don't know if you noticed the way I did this. I organized by like most to least realistic. Anyway, I meant to mention that up at the top because I thought it was a cool formatting, but whatever. Anyway, favorite fantasy of the year. I'm already buried the lead by holding it up, but Black Sun by Rebecca Rowan Hoyce. I had a lot of really great fantasy I could have chosen from. Could have been Poppy War. Poppy War probably, no, I'm not gonna change my mind right now. I was like, maybe Poppy War should have gotten it. No, Black Sun by Rebecca Rowan Hoyce. This is a pre-Columbian inspired fantasy about, golly, the different sects of this like religion that all kind of follow a different god, and one of them has been kind of demoted to almost like cult status. They've kind of been kicked out of the thing, and now they're rising up again, and it's kind of following different people as they have to deal with that. And I just fell in love with these characters so quickly, and the plot's kind of hard to sum up, but like the characters are what drove me through this book. I love them all. I would literally kill for Serapio. Like, I would. So that's not a good synopsis, but there you go. All right. Should I have said Poppy War? Honorable mentions to Poppy War. There you go. Quickly, I'm gonna, what order do I want to do this in? I'm gonna quickly, my worst book of the year. I wasn't gonna do this. I DNF'd a lot of stuff. Here, let me just, basically, anything in this stack could be considered for worst of the year. These are just the ones I own. There are definitely other books I did not like that I didn't own, but owning them makes it worse because I spent money on these. Eleanor Oliphant, ableist, didn't like it. The entire Era 2 of Mistborn, disgusting. I'm still gonna read the fourth one because I have to finish it. I've put too much effort into this to not finish it, but weirdly misogynistic, felt like step back in writing for Sanderson. I don't get it. Don't like it. However, the worst thing, by far the worst thing I had to read this year was Relentless by Tim Grover. I hated this book, so I had to read it for work, which is part of what makes it worse because I was required to read something this trash. But this is just horribly ableist, horribly like, I can't. The advice in this book are like, push yourself to the point of breaking and then get up and keep going. It ignores any sort of physical or mental disabilities that would prevent somebody from doing something like that. It kind of has this attitude of like, sure, it's fine if you don't commit yourself 130% to one thing, but what are you even wasting your time with it? You could never be the best if you're gonna waste your time with a caring family and being a good father or whatever. Like, it was gross. Like, if you want to be successful, you gotta have a gambling addiction and be an alcoholic and waste all your time cheating on your wife with prostitutes. That's Tim Grover's advice. And that brings me to the end of this. Real quick, I just want to go through my top 3 in each of the genres because it's fun. They'll be scrolling on the screen so you can see. But for new releases, the top 3 were The Galaxy and the Ground Within. That's the book I was trying to remember last time. Starland and Remote Control. Remote Control is a really good one. For novellas, The Lost Daughter Collective, To Be Taught If Fortunate. And Ring Shout. I guess I could be holding up the ones that I own. To Be Taught If Fortunate and Ring Shout. For YA, Elatsue, Come Tumbling Down, and The Exiled 7. Is that really YA? The Exiled 7. For classics, Kindred, Fried Green Tomatoes at the Whistle Stop Cafe. For the record, the reason this wasn't higher and didn't make my favorite was because I read it at the beginning of the year and I've learned a lot since then. Reading a lot of the reviews changed my mind on Fried Green Tomatoes. Dracula, Contemporary, The Wicker King, A Man Called Ove, Black Enough, which was also very good. For fantasy, Harrow the Ninth, Black Sun.
Ring Shout.
It's unfair that those skewed it because, and I'm just gonna hold it up anyway, Dragon Republic deserves to be on that list, but it's not. Top 3 for graphic novels. Oh, this whole stacking all the books up was dumb. For graphic novels, The Sleeper and the Spindle, Through the Woods, and The Daughters of Ys. For historical fiction, Ring Shout, Kindred, and 7 Years to Sin, which does not fit the vibe. For horror, Ring Shout, Sorrowland, and House of Leaves. For mystery and thriller, Harrow the Ninth, because I added Harrow the Ninth, but whatever. Elatsue, and The Wicker King. For nonfiction, the top 3 would be In the Dream House, Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria, and Disfigured, on fairy tales, disability, and making space. For romance, it is The Exiled 7, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, and Lore Olympus, Volume 1, Season 1. For sci-fi, Harrow the Ninth, To Be Taught If Fortunate, and Gideon the Ninth. For short stories, Love After the End, Through the Woods, and Black Enough. I want to give an honorable mention here to Her Body and Other Parties, which was also fantastic, and it kind of surprised me that didn't come up in the top 3. And for literary fiction, The Lost Daughter Collective, Fried Green Tomatoes at the Whistle Stop Cafe, and Clara and the Sun. Whew. This is going to be a mess to edit. Anyway, this has been a lot of fun, kind of stressful. Like I said, my favorite overall, I don't know. No, it's The Lost Daughter Collective. The emotional impact that had on me is just unignorable. So it's The Lost Daughter Collective. But honestly, Harrow the Ninth, just, I love her. So anyway, these are all, I don't know how to stack this pile without it falling over, are, oh god, my favorites, or some of them, the ones that I own, of 2021. These are some close runner-ups for favorites of 2021. Please let me know down below what was your favorite book you read this year. And let me know what you're planning on reading in 2022. I've already read 1.5 books, and it's shaping up to be a good year this year, so I love y'all. See you next year.